Welcome to Beyond the Shelf. This is Dawn,
I'm Jenny.
and we are very excited to
Always.
share with you some author interviews from this year's local author festival. I think we interviewed like 7 people,
7 or 8, yep.
something like that.
Yeah.
All fantastic and new to us authors. So here is some of our conversations with them. So we have Rebecca Greenfield here.
Hi.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. So glad to be here.
We're very happy to have you here, too. I've known Rebecca since she was like 10 years old, and now she has a baby and everything, so it's really fun for me to be able to interview her. I have read, I think, almost all of your books also.
I think you have.
So, Rebecca, we want to know what started you on the path to writing?
I remember, so really far back, I saw this purple pen at the Hallmark store that I thought looked really cool. And so I asked my mom to buy it for me. And then I started writing a little House on the Prairie type of series on notebook paper. So that was like years ago. And then in high school, I wrote Duster Nuffle and talked with Cassie, who we went to church together, and she did some water paint coloring. And then my mom tucked it away somewhere safe. And then in college, I went through kind of like a faith crisis and kind of was reading a lot, and then felt the need to express what I was learning and kind of process what I was learning. And I started writing raw shortly after I graduated college, I believe, like when I was living on my own. That's when I really became more serious about actually doing something with my writing. And so I started writing that as more of an adult way of processing things. It became a labor of love. And then it wasn't until I had gotten married and had to move and leave a job I loved that I finally said, if I have to leave this job I love, I want to prioritize my writing and do something with it and actually get these things published. And so Little House on the Prairie never made it published. It's still in a drawer somewhere. But I did publish raw, and then that started the journey of writing more and really feeling called to write, and a process to hopefully help others, but help myself really work through things. It's been a cathartic exercise over the years for me.
So the last book that you wrote was the deep dive into the book of Joel from the Bible.
Yes.
Do you have anything else that you're working on right now that you can share?
Kind of one that was talking about mindset and such, but that needs a lot of work. So we're working on some of those things, but there's a lot more to
Well,
it.
you still work full time.
Yeah.
You have a baby full time.
Yes.
And so writing isn't always top priority.
Correct. Yes, it takes a hit. It definitely does, and that's been hard because you have things going through your mind and your heart. And as another author encouraged me, they said sometimes now is the composting season. So you're getting all this information, it's going through your head. You're writing certain things here and there, but you're not being able to do anything substantial, amount of time because your life doesn't afford that opportunity for you to do that right now. But it's going to grow into something, and there's going to be a harvest from that. Right now it's just composting, and it's getting the soil nutritious for the true plant to take root.
One thing that we try to always ask anybody that we're interviewing is, are you currently reading anything right now that you would like to share with us?
I'm reading A Faith That Will Not Fail by Michelle Couchard. I think is how you say her last name. I have a habit of getting into too many books and then starting them and then needing a long vacation to finish them all at the same time. So sure. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Rebecca. It's always a delight to talk to you
Thank
and
you.
see you. So
You
I'm really
too.
glad you're here, and
you.
I hope that a lot of people come by. And as a person who's known you for years, I can testify how encouraging Rebecca is as
Thank
a woman
you.
and as a mother, as a wife, and she always encourages my heart. So
You are so
so glad you are here today.
Thank you. You
Thank
encourage
you.
my heart too. Thank you.
All right, welcome. This is Lindsay Ward. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So most of your books or all of your books are children's picture books?
Yes, I have a couple board books, but yeah, mostly all picture books.
And then I just saw one on your table. This is a coloring book?
Oh yeah,
Is that one actually a coloring book?
It is.
Cool.
I have a series. The first book was This Book is Gray, and the second one was Pink is Not a Color, which is all about the colors personified, but it's teaching you color theory also. And so as an extension of that, I wanted to do a color theory coloring book for kids where you could learn what is a primary color, what's a secondary color, what's a hue, and so it kind of teaches basic color theory, but using the characters from those books. So I do coloring books and activity books too.
Do you have a background in art or education that
Yes.
lends to that?
I actually started as an illustrator. I had no plans to write. That happened by accident. I studied illustration in school. Then I kind of fell into writing, which I feel like is most writers, if I'm being honest, or at least most writers I know. It just kind of came together. So now I write and have other people illustrate sometimes. I write and illustrate, and then I also illustrate for other people too. So it just depends on what the project is.
Do you have recurring characters in your picture books?
I do. I have a couple different series. The one I mentioned earlier with the colors, that's a series. And then I have the Dexter T-Rexter series, which is a toy dinosaur that's very neurotic and worries about everything. And then I have a vehicle series, Scooper and Dumper, which is about a dump truck and a front loader that are in a small town, and they kind of take care of their town in different seasons and what goes on in a small town, essentially, which is based off my small town that I live in. So
That's fun. And you're an Ohio girl, right?
I'm not from here originally, but I've lived in Ohio for 15 years now.
Okay.
So I'm originally from California, but my husband's from here, and we live in Peninsula, and I love it. I love the Midwest.
Peninsula is such a cute little town.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it's so children's booky. Like, we have the Polar Express come through, and it's just like I don't know, it's like a magical place to
And
live.
it's one of our Cleveland libraries, too.
Yeah,
yeah.
Peninsula.
I love.
Yeah.
It's like a tiny library, but the librarians are amazing, and it's just I love it. Yeah,
So how long have you been writing?
I think I've been doing this about 15 years now.
So did Ohio bring it out of you then?
I studied illustration in school, and then when I graduated, I bounced around a bit and lived in New York and Boston for a while just because that's where publishers were. And I met my husband when I was in Boston, and he's from here. And then when he told me what the cost of living in Ohio was, I was like, I'm sorry, what?
Oh, yeah.
And then so moving from Boston to here, I could do it full time. Whereas there, I was working in a children's bookstore full time, and then kind of moonlighting as an illustrator at night and trying to make it work. And when I moved here, I was able to kind of phase out my part-time job over time and start, doing that full time, which was really nice.
So what do you enjoy reading? What genre?
I read a lot of different. I mean, I feel like as of late, it's been a lot of like thrillers and rom-com stuff, just because it's like I can kind of just get into it, and it's not like literary over the top where I have to think about every single thing that's happening, and I can draw at the same time, and they're fun. Yeah, I don't know. I try to jump around. I try to keep an open mind with what I read too, just to learn.
Yeah.
I think about different stuff, and yeah. So.
Well, thank you. Thanks for
Yes.
coming today. I hope a lot of people come by, and hope that you'll come back next year.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you. All right, now we are going to have a little discussion with Debbie Ashley. Debbie, you write faith-based books, correct?
Yes, I do.
And how many books have you published so far?
I have published one book that was entirely my own work, and then as a compilation with some other authors, we published a book on Epiphany.
Awesome. So how does that work that you do a full family book, like doing like a 12 Days of Christmas thing, or how does that work?
It's similar to that. This book, A Path to Epiphany, actually begins about 10 days prior to Christmas and then goes through to Epiphany on January 6th. And so what it allows you to do is when your kids are still off school after Christmas, you still have some activities and some things that you can kind of continue the holiday season. And each day has a poem that can be read out loud, or your children can read it. And then there's a few just simple questions for a little bit of interaction. And then there's also an activity. So it's a very family-friendly holiday book.
So tell us about your book that you wrote by yourself.
All right. My book, Faith Unhindered, Finding the Freedom to Trust God Completely, was published beginning of in January 2022. And this book has kind of a two-part feel to it. I grew up spending many days on my grandparents' farm, and just had some really great experiences, but also they went through some hard times. And so I was able to take some of those stories and weave it into some faith lessons because, you know, many times faith is very exciting and it's very fulfilling. But we can also hit roadblocks on our faith and have some challenges. And so kind of using some of those challenges from my grandparents' life and weaving those into what can we learn or how can we find a way to walk through those times when our faith is challenging.
So is that what inspired you, just spending time with your grandparents that kind of inspired you to write this book, or what got you going?
Partly. I would say the other part of that is my husband is a pastor, and so we have worked with people for many years, and I have had the joy of working with women for many years. And just over the course of time, and you listen to people's stories, and you watch what they go through, you come to realize that we all have those times when our faith is strong or we're excited and we want to know more about God. And then there's those times where life just kind of stops us in our tracks and we just really don't know what to do.
One of the things that I love about books is that we can find that our own experiences are not just unique to us, that other people are going through similar things. So having books like this, that like you can relate to somebody and you can realize
you're not alone.
You're not
Exactly.
alone.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
So one thing that we always like to ask our authors or whomever we might be interviewing is, are you currently reading anything right now? And if you are, would you like to share it with us? Or do you have a favorite genre of book that you like to just sit down and read?
I would say I typically lean towards nonfiction. I think because I love reading how other people put things into words that I've kind of been thinking, but I don't know how to say it yet. And so when I read nonfiction, it kind of gives me some language to use to express things.
Thank you.
Thank
We're
you.
so glad you could join us this year.
Thank you.
This is George Eby, who is from Medina.
Actually, Barberton.
Barberton, okay. So this is your second year joining us at the Author Festival. Thanks for coming back.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
glad to be here.
Your newest book that just came out in September, is that your third book, or what are you up to these days?
Well, actually, it's the beginning of a new series. So it's an ebook kind of introduction novella to what will be my second series, which is a fantasy epic about a mythical world. But prior to that, I worked on a science fiction series. And that's the one that's currently available and that we have here today.
So when did you start writing?
So I actually started writing way back in high school. It was an interesting story because back then I didn't like to write or even read that much. But I had a teacher that kind of turned me on to reading. And from there, I just became like a voracious reader. And then when I always had a vivid imagination and I always needed somewhere for it to go. But it was hard to kind of figure out what to do because I couldn't draw, and this was the days before, you could get a video camera and edit your own stuff. When I discovered reading, I thought, well, wow, this is something I can sit down and do, and all I need is a pen and paper.
So your first series, when did you publish that?
This current series, Helen of Mars, actually started as a short story in a collection that I was invited to submit a story to.
Okay.
And so from there, we just decided that the story was strong enough to be expanded into something else and to something further. So I just went to work bringing that world into a bigger light, and we published the first book in 2020.
You mostly write science fiction or fantasy, or what is your genre?
Yeah, sci-fi and fantasy is what I've gravitated to in the last decade or so. I actually started out years ago, and when I was younger, really interested in writing thrillers and crime fiction, things like that. I just kind of got disillusioned with that genre. It was too dark. I just wanted something a little bit more light and fun and adventurous. That's really where my heart was taking me at the time. So I decided to move completely into more of a young adult swashbuckling adventure kind of thing versus like a dark crime adult thing. And I'm glad I did, because my personality, my mindset is more geared toward that. I've just more my speed, so that's why I went into that.
So the teacher that got you to read, what was it? Suspense thriller that got you hooked on reading? Or-
Yeah, absolutely.
So is YA now your favorite genre to read, or
Actually, I have a very eclectic just taste. I get in moods, so maybe one day I'm in the mood for a sci-fi book and I'll read one, and then the next time I'm done with that, I might move into a crime thriller or history. I just have many different interests when it comes to reading. I do think it's important to kind of focus in on one specific thing when I'm writing a particular topic, and usually when you get into like doing a series, you're in that for a while. But I think it helps to have a well-rounded, just different types of reading that you like, because you get many different voices, many different points of view, and it all kind of goes in to help you create your own thoughts and your own worlds when it comes time to do that.
Well, thank you, George. We appreciate you coming, and hopefully we'll see you again next year.
Absolutely. I appreciate you having me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, we're now with Audrey Kate Gonzalez.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us and for being a part of our author festival this year.
Yeah.
How many books have you written now?
So I have 3 books that I've written.
And your newest one, that's part of the second series?
Yes.
Okay.
So my newest book is part of the series called Welcome to Noir, and it's called Revenge of the Mall Santa. And it's a middle grade mystery for kids 8 to 12.
I read middle grade. I read YA. I don't care. I don't stick to just because it says adult. I have to read that, obviously.
Most of my audience is actually adults. So, Welcome to Noir is marketed towards 8 to 12-year-olds. And This is Noir is my other series, and that's marketed for 13 to 18. But again, most of my readers are adults, especially adults who have a nostalgic place in their heart for Goosebumps
I
and
was just
Fear
gonna ask
Street
that, yeah.
and anything R.L. Stein, Christopher Pike, Point Horror. If you grew up in that era, you'll probably be interested in my books because that was where the inspiration came from.
That's fantastic. One of the things that as a teen services person that I do is kind of doing like an aging up. So if a kid likes Goosebumps, like trying to find something that is a little bit older that's going to be like that they like to read. So got you on my list now.
That was my thought process, because I started with This is Noir first, and then there are some kids who don't know how to like jumpstart into horror, or like where to start with horror, and I was the weird kid who grew up loving horror. I kind of wanted to make sure I could introduce that genre to kids of all ages. So while Welcome to Noir is more mystery based, there are some little like jump scares here and there, some little thrills, just to kind of get that age group prepared for something like This is Noir, so then as they get older, they want to read that series.
But it's not so dark that it's going to scare them and not give them nightmares all night or whatever.
No, definitely not. I actually know of 2 kids who are reading one book, Tomato Juice, right now, and their parents have told me like they can't put it down. Like they're reading it at night, and like
That must make you feel so good.
It does. It
That's
does. Because
great.
I get excited when adults want to read my book, but when you get the age group that like that's who you've been writing for, get into your books, and then your parents are like, yeah, they won't stop reading it. Like that's super exciting.
That is fun.
Fantastic.
So how long have you been writing then? Officially. I mean, I obviously you probably were writing when you were a child or whatever, but
So officially been writing since 2020. I started Tomato Juice in 2020. It started as a short story for one of my college courses, and my professor was like, oh, you should turn this into like a full-length thing. And I was like, bet. So I decided that Tomato Juice should be like a full-length thing, and then I went with the whole series thing because I love Goosebumps and Fear Street so much. So it just
Do you
spiraled from
aspire to R.L. Stein and having like 40 books in that series?
I want 50 states. So each book is set in a state. And so the first 2 that I have are Louisiana and Indiana. Tomato Juice is Indiana, and Alligator Skin is Louisiana. Because the idea of the book series is that Nora is a city that exists in every state, and weird stuff happens there.
So is this a genre that you continue to read, or do you like to read other things? on your own?
I do like to read other things, but this is a genre that I heavily read more so than any other genre, just to keep up with the craft and the trends that are happening within the genre.
Well,
Yes.
thank you so much for joining us and for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
We're now sitting here with Alex Erickson. We're very excited to have you with us today. So last year in our Ohio authors episode, when we talked about various authors from the state of Ohio, we mentioned you. But Jenny tried to read a whole bunch of the authors that we talked about, and she read one of your books. I think you liked it.
Yeah, I
Jenny
like cozy murder. I like everything, so it's hard for me to. If I don't like a book, I usually give it like a 1 or 2 star. So
With me sitting here, there's only one right answer, though. So
yeah, I'm going to change my rating right now since we're sitting here together. But I read your first bookstore cafe mystery, Death by Coffee. So what got you writing cozy mysteries?
the editor asked was pretty much it. I had an editor from an urban fantasy series, so he just kind of asked if I'd give it a try, and I was like, sure, because I read a lot of different things. So though cozy wasn't exactly one of my well-read stuff, because when he first asked, I was like, is that like Kathy Reich's books, like the Bones books, which it's not. But, and I like trying doing different things, and it fits. I could be a cozy character. I don't curse. I don't do a lot of the stuff that they don't want in the books. I'm very kind of
It's clean.
quiet and clean
Yeah.
and calm on my own. Unless you get into the music and stuff, then it gets loud. But
Yeah. No, that's good. So, had you read any cozy mysteries before writing, or did you just dive in?
they sent me a bunch, but
Okay.
I sort of started working on it before I got them to
Okay.
read, just because I figured out what it was. I kind of looked into it. I was like, oh, I've seen, Murder, She Wrote, and I've read
Yeah.
some old, like, Agatha Christie's and things before, so it wasn't totally foreign. So, so when you read the first book, I feel like, I'd like to think I've gotten better and I understand the genre more now than when I first started. I was kind of getting into it kind of blind almost. Not quite blind, but feeling blind and a little lost and worried that I was doing it all wrong.
About how many do you release a year,
For this series,
or books in total?
2 is typically
Okay.
per year right now.
I find that so impressive.
Agreed.
That just blows me away. I just think it would take me years just to write one.
And those are just the ones that get published. I do very good at compartmentalizing things, so I can just flip a switch. So just the other day, I was working on the second in a new series that's coming out in a couple months.
A Pose Before Dying?
Yes.
Okay.
Which is a cat yoga themed cozy.
It's going to be pictures, like
Nope,
a picture
nope,
person.
nope,
No, it's
this
yoga.
is actually
okay.
Yep. So
Cool.
and then I worked on that for a couple hours, and then just flipped over to sort of a epic fantasy, action fantasy type thing, story that I've been kind of working on the side for 10 years that just hasn't worked yet. But
That's kind of impressive, though, that you can switch from like, I'm going to work on this story now, and then
Yeah.
I'm going to work on that story now.
I have one of those brains that never shuts off, but I'm good at switching up really really fast.
That's fantastic.
I only read one book at a time, but I usually don't read the same thing back to back like
Right.
genres. And
Great. Well, we really appreciate you being here. I hope that you'll be able to come back next year, and you'll have A Pose Before Dying, and let's see, next year is 2025, so you'll probably have 2 new books by then.
I have, I would say what the next Death by book is, but I can't remember off the top of my head. Like, I'm completely blanking. I think it's Caramel Macchiato.
Okay. Well, thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Hello, this is Alexa Burton. You write adult sci-fi.
Mostly, I've got my fingers in a lot of different pots, but sci-fi is the passion.
And then we were talking earlier, you're dabbling in some picture books.
Yeah, there is one picture book available now. I will probably have another one in April or May hitting the shelves. Then we're looking at November for a Christmas children's book, and probably March for yet a fourth one.
So you got plans. You got.
I have a lot of things that I've been sitting on and just haven't gotten to finish.
So are you illustrating the books?
I am. And that's kind of what the first kids book I wrote like 20 years ago. And I kept trying to get other people to illustrate it for me, and nobody was doing it. Everyone was too busy or life. And then one of my friends made just an offhanded suggestion, and I'm like, you know what? I kind of like that. Let's play with it. And illustrations happened pretty easily. I took art in school, but I grew up around some really, truly phenomenal artists. So I always compared myself to them. And while I do have art talent and abilities, I look at what I'm doing and I look at the like photorealism that they were doing, and I'm like, no. But I'm not photorealistic in my artwork. I would love to be. I'm not.
I don't think that that's necessarily what makes a great picture book.
It definitely isn't. It's just that's what's in my brain.
Sure, yeah. So you've had picture book ideas for a long time. Your fiction novel, has that been a work in progress for a long time?
Well, I mean, a long time in the sense that I started it 4 years ago, but it really didn't live before that. I'm working on a sequel, but there's also a companion book. So if you picture 2 book ones sharing a book 2, the other book 1 is a story that I've wanted to write for years. But this one is extremely intimidating to me for various reasons. It just feels like a very large, very important story. And I wasn't ready to write it yet. And I guess maybe that's how the companion book started, From Winter. And I'm writing its sequel now, which doesn't have a title. Hopefully it will soon. That really bothers me. After I finish the sequel, I will go back and write that intimidating one. I think I'm there now.
You also mentioned you were working on a cookbook.
I am. It's definitely more of a tertiary project. It's kind of a biography / cookbook.
Okay.
I'm calling it My Life Through Food. And I know to some extent everyone hates the 8 pages of personal information that come before all the internet recipes.
Oh, sure.
But it's about how life and food relate, because they truly do. Food is so ingrained in pretty much all of our social culture. So it's about that. Different memories and experiences and some recipes that go along with that.
You've talked a little bit here about what you write about. Do you read the same genres that you write, or?
I read a lot of science fiction. I read a lot of fantasy. I don't write fantasy. I don't know. That's just never really struck me. The science fiction is really where I sit.
Is there anything that you're reading right now that you're enjoying?
I just started Murtaugh by Christopher Poloni. I'm not that far in. I'm not far in enough to make a comment.
Have you read the other
I
Aragon
read the
books?
others,
Okay.
yeah.
That's fantastic. Well, thank you for being here today.
It was a pleasure. Thank you
chatting
for
with
having
us,
me.
And we'll see you around the library at Cookbook Club and whatnot. Then
Yes,
too.
Cookbook Club is so much fun.
Thank you, Alexa.
Thank you very much.
I am going to be talking with Kat Russell. Kat, this is your first time coming to the author event in Orville, correct?
Correct.
How many books have you written, or how long have you been writing?
Well, I started writing in 2007, but my first published book was 2019. And I just published my 5th book, which is a poetry chapbook that's online. I have 4 physical books here.
So what does that mean, poetry chat book?
Oh, a chapbook is a very, very short book of poetry as opposed to a full collection.
Oh, okay.
So like a chapbook might only be like 20 pages.
I see. And so it's only available online.
That one's only available online. It's very short. I was just dipping my toe into self-publishing to see how it would work, if I could do it, if I liked it, and I like it. So I'm planning a new book now.
Oh, fun. So has poetry always been your genre of choice?
Well, I started off doing NaNoWriMo. I was terrible, but I got better. I really liked it, so I went and I started taking classes and going to poetry groups and writing groups and workshops and learning. Then I participated in this meme called Friday Flash for a while, where you post a piece of flash fiction, which is a very short piece of fiction, like less than 1,000 words.
Okay.
You would post that once a week on Friday. And I did that for a while. And then years later, I started getting into poetry when my father died. So.
Okay. So have you ever been part of like an anthology where you are with a bunch of other authors and
Yes.
just okay.
Yes. When I was participating in Friday Flash, I did that. I
Okay,
did the
yeah.
Best of Friday Flash. They had 2 volumes. I did both of those. Most recently, I was in the Ohio Bards Poetry Anthology.
What got you going writing in the first place?
Well, I told you I came across this challenge called NaNoWriMo. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's National Novel Writing Month. Every November, it's a self-challenge to write a rough draft novel. You can't write the first word before November 1st, and you have to finish by November 30th midnight.
Okay.
And it doesn't have to be good because it's a rough draft, so you can always go back and fix it. It's just to get it out there, to get it out so you can have something to edit. And I did that, and it was terrible, but I really loved it.
Yeah.
So that's when I started learning, and that was in 2007. But it never occurred to me I could be an author because that was like my heroes were all authors, and I just couldn't imagine that I could write an entire book, and now I have like 5. So
Yeah. Wow, that's really cool. So do you have something coming out?
I'm working on an audiobook of my last poetry collection, which was Kaleidoscope.
Okay.
I'm hoping that's going to come out this year. I am also working on another self-published manuscript, which is going to be kind of a poetic memoir of the pandemic. I'm harvesting some of my old blog posts from the pandemic on because I figured that kind of chronicles the time period. And they say, like, may you live in interesting times is a curse. But we've all lived in interesting times recently.
Yes.
And even though someone might not be interested in me personally, having a chronicle of that time period through a single person, I think, is useful.
So one thing that we always ask anybody that we interview is, are you currently reading anything right now, or do you have a particular genre that you kind of go towards?
I'm reading, it's an Emily Dickinson murder mystery, but I can't remember the name of it. It's,
By Ashley Flowers?
Yes. Amanda Flowers.
Amanda Flowers.
Because I could not stop for death.
Yeah.
Something like that. I'm also rereading Spoon River Anthology, which is a poetry collection of a small town, and all the poems are basically the ghosts in the graveyard telling their own story.
Oh, fun. Well, thank you for coming today. I'm so
you.
glad you made it to Orville, and hopefully we'll see you again next year.
All right, so upcoming activities. Of course, there is the Great North American Solar Eclipse happening on Monday, which is the 8th. I think it's supposed to be like 3:15-ish is when totality occurs.
Something like that. And it's supposed to last for almost 3 minutes. So
if you haven't picked up solar glasses yet, by some crazy chance, stop by the library and get a pair.
And then Coffee and Crafts will be that Tuesday, April 9th. And it's going to be at the Orville YMCA this month. And is that the way it's going to be from now on, or is that just a one-off?
It's just a one-off for this month. So the one-off is it's on a Tuesday and it's at the Y.
Okay. And you guys are going to be doing watercolor bookmarks. Sounds so pretty. And then we're going to have book club on Thursday, April 11th. The book that they are going to be doing is With the Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo. Yeah, I knew that.
It's a fantastic book if you haven't read it.
Is it?
Yeah, it's a young adult
book.
book.
YA. I haven't read it yet. I'm going to have to. And that's at 10 in the morning and then again at 6:30 that evening.
Also, starting on the 11th is the Friends of the Library used book sale. So it's the 11th, 12th, and 13th. We're partnering with Turning Point Coalition for Pizza and Books, which is an event. We invite the middle schoolers and their families to come enjoy some pizza, play some games, and the middle school students get to pick out a free book. So that is on the 18th from 4 till 6.
Okay, and then the Young Writers Workshop. We did one of those before. We're doing another one. That is going to be Friday, April 19th at 4 o'clock. That is for middle and high schoolers. You're going to write together. You're going to share your writing. You're going to have fun. This is not for a grade. This is just for fun. And then Bits and Bites is back on Tuesday, April 23rd from 5:30 to 7:30. And they are going to teach you guys how to edit digital photos. And Spring Trendy Titles is going to be Thursday, April 25th at 3:30, and you can see what new spring books are going to be released.
Awesome. The Seed Exchange is continuing through the end of May, so all of April into May as well. So that is a lot of stuff happening in April, and that doesn't include any children's activities. I think there's a registration for Mother's Day story time in there somewhere.
fun.
So check out the library calendar for more events and registration. And of course, you can always come into the library and visit us and learn more of that stuff.
Yes. Thanks, guys. We'll see you at the library.
All right, bye.